Greetings to you all, and welcome back to the 31 Nights of Frights. So far in the series, we've covered the origins of the horror genre, explored the German expressionist films from the silent era, and took a look at a few of the universal monster movies of the 30s that brought horror into the golden age of cinema. Today we're going to be taking a leap from the 30s to the 40s, specifically 1942, and taking a look at the mystery thriller film Cat People. A film that was produced and developed by 𝙆𝙊𝙄𝙉𝙎 for RKO Pictures. Before going defunct in 1959, RKO Pictures was one of the big 5 film studios of Hollywood's golden age in cinema. The other 4 being Paramount, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox and MGM. In addition to producing and distributing many landmark films in Hollywood, including 1933's King Kong and 1941's Citizen Kane, RKO was also known for their string of B-movies and film noirs. After the success that Universal Pictures was having with their monster movies, which absolutely dominated the 30s and 40s, such as Dracula, Frankenstein and The Wolfman, just to name a few, RKO wanted to jump on the bandwagon and start distributing cheap horror films and thrillers. Producing B-movies with low budgets reduced the financial risk for the studio, and it also filled up their release schedules. In fact, it wasn't long before RKO set up a specialised horror B-movie unit and put a man by the name of 𝙆𝙊𝙄𝙉𝙎 in charge. Loughton was a Russian-born novelist, screenwriter and producer who would go on to produce many B-movies for RKO Pictures within this unit. However, his job wasn't so simple. RKO Pictures had a few rules for Loughton. Firstly, the films had to be 75 minutes long or less, within the cost of around $150,000 to produce, which even in the 1940s was considered quite a tight budget. And finally, Loughton's bosses would actually provide him with a title as a basis for the entire production. Basically, with a very limited budget and literally just a title to go off with nothing else, Loughton had to provide RKO with a horror film. To me, the idea of that is just absolutely insane. You know, someone saying, here's a title I just randomly came up with, go make a movie. And the first of these 𝙆𝙊𝙄𝙉𝙎 movies was Cat People. Starring actress Simone Simon, Cat People tells the story of Irena Dubrovna, a mysterious woman from Serbia who, now living in America, catches the eye of a man called Oliver Reed, played by Kent Smith. After Irena invites Oliver to her apartment for tea, the two begin to develop a bit of a romance. In her apartment, Oliver notices a statue depicting a man on a horse who has a large cat impaled on his sword and is intrigued by it. Irena then opens up about her heritage, telling Oliver that many years ago, the people of her village were enslaved, and as a result, the Christian residents turned to a life of witchcraft and devil worship. I guess everyone has their own coping mechanisms. When King John, the man depicted in statue form in Irena's apartment, freed the village from slavery, he witnessed the corruption of its inhabitants and had many villagers killed. However, according to Irena, the wisest and most wicked of them escaped into the mountains. The next day, Oliver buys Irena a kitten, but when he gifts it to her, the kitten hisses with Irena, revealing that she doesn't really get along with cats. That's something I can definitely relate to. Dogs all the way. So they go to the pet store and exchange it for a bird, which later drops dead from fear when Irena tries to touch it. And now I'll be honest, at first I thought she was going to grab the bird and shove it in her mouth like some old Tweety Bird cartoon, or like Catwoman in Batman Returns. Irena then explains to Oliver that she believes she is a descendant from an ancient tribe of cat people. That is, the devil worshippers of her native village who can transform into panthers if they feel heightened emotions such as jealousy, hate, or in this case, love. Irena fears that this may be hereditary and that she may be a danger to the man who she has fallen in love with. So what does Oliver do here? Well, he just shrugs everything off and declares his love for her and that he thinks they should get married, of course. A proposition of which Irena agrees to. And people say relationships move fast these days, jeez. As quick and as silly as the romance moves in this film, I think now is a good time to say that up to this point, it does feel like a really genuine romance film from that era. It's also got that golden age magic and sophistication to it as well. It's a pretty classy film to say it's a B-movie. Jimmy Stewart wouldn't look too out of place in this film, but he's too busy seeing imaginary 6-foot tall rabbits. Yeah, I want to see Harvey be made into a horror movie. Throughout the course of the film, Irène's cat people obsession does start to take a toll on her marriage with Oliver, so Oliver finally tries to get his wife some help by setting up a meeting between her and psychiatrist Dr. Judd, played by Tom Conway. And this scene has some wonderfully and interestingly lit shots. The movie does have a very film noir sort of feeling to it, and the lighting and shadows play a massive part in its visual aesthetic. It's also worth noting that Irene is so haunted by her history, yet she owns a lot of objects with the imagery of cats. I believe that the film's trying to make some kind of point about trauma and not being able to fully let go of the past or the things that haunt us. But I'm not 100% sure on this, that's just how I read the movie. I know a lot of people have their own ideas about what this film is trying to say in its subtext, and if you guys have an idea then let me know in the comments. Oliver, now finding himself unhappy for apparently the first time in his life. Obviously not a lot of things actually faze this man. He's definitely not fazed when his wife tells him that he could turn into a panther any second and murder him. So he confides in his co-worker Alice, played by Jane Randolph, who confesses her love for him, and Irene becomes jealous. But as the film turns into a Shakespearean love triangle story, we get a scene that changed horror forever. Irene spies on Alice and Oliver one night, and while walking home, Alice feels as if she's being followed by something in the dark. At first, it's clear that Irene is following as her footsteps are loud and they're shown on the screen as well. But then things start to get a bit more quiet and menacing. Alice turns around to see that nobody is there before gradually speeding up. After running beneath a very shadowy bridge, she reaches a post. She stops, and then suddenly... This is what is regarded to be the first ever jump scare in cinema history. Because of that, this scene must be one of the most influential in the entire genre, as horror films, especially ones made in the modern day, mostly rely on the jump scare. And this scene is so well done, by the way, but also so visually interesting too, with how it uses shadows to make the viewer think about what could be lurking in the dark. The sound of the bus also resembles that of a hissing cat. It's just a genius and well-crafted scene. The technique of the jump scare actually became known as the Luton bus first because of this film. So really, the technical name for a jump scare is the Luton bus. There's another similar scene later on in the film that relies completely on shadows and atmosphere to build tension and scares, and it works wonderfully. Later on in the film, Irene tells Oliver that she has overcome her past and is no longer afraid, but Oliver does a full 180 and tells her that it's all too late and he now loves Alice. To be honest, in this film, Oliver can be a bit of a dick. This leaves Irene distraught and tips her over the edge. Now, I'm not actually going to talk about the end of this film or give it away, mainly because I think it's now a very underappreciated little gem of a film, and I highly recommend for everyone to check it out if they haven't seen it already. When Cat People was initially released, RKO Pictures was actually very unhappy with the film. They were expecting to get a film back from Luton which featured 6-foot-tall cat-like monsters to perhaps compete with the icons of Universal Pictures, but instead they got a film noir, mystery, psychological thriller. Despite RKO's thoughts, the film was a massive success and made millions off its small budget. This resulted, of course, in Luton making more horror B-movies for RKO, including a sequel. Luton managed to make a film from a very shoestring budget and with just 2 words: Cat People. And instead of making a Universal Monsters-esque spectacle, which within the budget he was given was probably not even possible anyway, he produced a sophisticated psychological thriller movie that shows a lot of effectiveness in its simplicity. Even if the budget was bigger, I'm sure this would have still been the film that Luton would have given to RKO. Not only was it the first film to use what we now call a jump scare, but it was one of the early horror films that proves that you can create tension and fear just by making an atmosphere. It's an extremely influential film in horror history that shows us that sometimes what you don't see on the screen can be just as scary as what you do see. So that concludes our look into Cat People. I hope you all really enjoyed today's episode. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this film, and join me in tomorrow's episode where we take another jump from the 40s to the 50s. That's right, the Atomic Age. I'll see you there.